It's the last year of the Mountain West as we know it, and this conference has got to go out with a bang.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Friday, and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Schade, and you are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content Monday through Friday, whether it's in season or out of season. We're here for you every single day. I want to thank all of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Of course, give a special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord channel. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every single detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward segment from Mazda. Move and be moved. Well, Isaac, we are moving on here with our fourth conference preview of the offseason here as we get ready for the start of the 25-26 season. The first week of practices, we also have coaching changes left and right in college basketball. It has been a wild September with all of the different moves that we have seen around this sport. Today, we're talking about the Mountain West. Lots of fun stuff going on in the Mountain West. Conference realignment is hitting this conference in a major way next season, but we're already seeing some of that happening this year. We're going to get into those details. We're going to give you some predictions. Who's going to be on the all-conference first team? Who's going to win this league? How many teams from the Mountain West? They've been pretty consistent, getting 4 or so teams in the big dance. Will that continue in the final year of this conference as we know it? That's what we want to talk about to start this show, Isaac, because there are major changes coming to this league after this upcoming season.
That's right, Andy. The glorious return of the Pac-12 next year. And along with that, the Pac-12 has essentially raided the Mountain West. So this is the last year before San Diego State, Boise State, Utah State, Colorado State, and Fresno State all join the Pac-12 in 2026-27. At the same time, Hawaii, UC Davis, and UTEP are all coming in next year. So, Andy, that is a unbalanced equation, if I can go back to math class there, where the outgoing basketball schools far exceed the what the incoming basketball schools will bring to the conference, and that is a massive step down in terms of men's basketball.
Yeah.
Andy, as you noted in our notes, 4 of the departing schools were between 42 and 61st at KenPom last year. We won't talk about where Fresno State was sitting, but the 3 incoming schools, UTEP was the highest at 162, then Hawaii at 227, and UC Davis at 250. So, Andy, clearly it's not getting back. In like, if this was a trade, it would be vetoed, basically, right? Like, it would not happen. And so, Andy, just some numbers from it to look at this. The Mountain West has had multiple NCAA tournament teams in each of the last 7 tournaments, and at least 4 of them in the last 4 tournaments. They've had 18 total bids that in that stretch, which, just for comparison's sake, the ACC and Big East have had 19 in that stretch. So right on par with those 2 power conferences. So, Andy, I think the question to ask is, A, can we wrap it up well this year? Can we get a 5th straight year of at least 4 teams in? Obviously, we'll talk about that more in depth at the end of the show. But is this the last year of consistent multi-bid NCAA? Like, by multi-bid in this case, I guess I'm meaning more than 2 NCAA tournament bids, because I don't see it going forward as much for the Mountain West.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll talk about this year's projections again a little later in the show. I think it's likely that it'll still be a multi-bid league. I do know that Joe Lunardi released his way too early bracketology projections for the month of September earlier this week, and he actually only had 1 team from the Mountain West, but he also did not have a single multi-bid conference outside of the Power 5, which feels like is unlikely to actually come to fruition.
Who was that he had? I haven't seen it. Was it San Diego State?
It was San Diego State, and he had him as a 10 seed, which feels shockingly low for where I think that team is actually going to end up. But
interesting.
Yeah, I think we probably are looking at sort of a last ride situation for the Mountain West. Now, we talked about the departing schools and obviously the relative lack of strength of the schools who are replacing them in 2026. But we also need to mention the school that is helping to replace them a year earlier in 2025, which is the Lopes of Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon was supposed to be part of that group alongside UTEP and Hawaii and Davis, and they ended up joining the conference a year early, just in part because of spite. Like that was part of this. Boise State and San Diego State kind of threw a pretty big fit about this happening and the timing of it happening, and kind of felt like they were getting pushed out and that their vote wasn't being counted. And it's kind of part of ongoing litigation and conversations that are happening with the Mountain West, with the new Pac-12, and now with Grand Canyon. But there's no debate that Grand Canyon is a good addition for men's basketball right away for this conference. They were 101st at KenPom last year, and that was in a much weaker conference in the WAC. They were, I think, 58th the year prior to that. This is a good program under Coach Bryce Drew. They're a quality addition for the Mountain West. And I think it's possible that even after these departures, starting in 2026, you'll have a Mountain West that still has New Mexico, that still has Nevada, that still has UNLV, that adds Grand Canyon. Like, I think that is a conference that could get 2 bids every once in a while. It's going to feel a little bit more like the current A10, or maybe
exactly. Yes.
Where it's like I don't think the WCC doesn't quite work as well because they have 2 very top heavy teams, and then there's very little teams competing after that. Where A10, I feel like, is a bit more of a comparison that I think works. But I think year in and year out, New Mexico, Grand Canyon, Nevada, UNLV, a couple of those teams at least will be competing for bids in the tournament. But the days of this being a 4 or 5 bid league are very likely over after this year. And they may already be over, because I'm not sure they're going to get to that mark this year either.
Which is unfortunate, Andy, because a last note on this before we move to the coaching changes is, hey, I think we saw in 2023, it's like we finally broke through the glass ceiling, the first ever Elite 8 for the Mountain West with San Diego State, not to mention that then turning into Final Four and runner-up. But Andy, nothing since that. Last year or 2 years ago, San Diego State made the Sweet 16, but no Elite Eights that year. And last year, the best the Mountain West did was the second round, where Colorado State and New Mexico got bounced both then, with, maybe a little travel call in favor of Maryland. So that could have made for a Sweet 16. But regardless, that is the thing. So maybe, as you said, a last ride. This might be the last chance for a while. Obviously, somebody could pop, but we'll see. Last year, Mountain West finished 6th in KenPom rankings, really close to the ACC at 5th. But there's that. New Mexico won the regular season. Colorado State on that late season charge was phenomenal behind Nate Clifford and Kyan Evans going for the Colorado State to win the tournament there. 4 teams in the NCAA tournament. San Diego State getting bounced in the first 4. Utah State lost in the first round. We already mentioned the 2. Colorado State and New Mexico losing in the second. But Andy, the biggest coaching conversation is not so much the hot seat conversation here as it is who's leaving in terms of 2 coaches and who's coming in terms of a third. What is going on there?
Yeah, I think, kind of continuing that conversation, obviously Colorado State is a program that's not staying in the Pac-12 after this, or in the Mountain West after this year, but they will have a new coach this year. Nico Medved took himself over to Minnesota in the Big Ten, and Ali Faroukmanesh. And if you remember that name, that is because he is an iconic college basketball figure from his NCAA tournament run. Gosh, well over a decade ago now. I'm feeling quite old thinking about that. But Faroukmanesh has been an assistant coach for a while with the Rams, and he's now going to take over as the head coach. And we'll see, what that looks like in year 1. I think you expect a little bit of a dip, but then they get into the Pac-12, and I'm very excited to see how Coach Faroukmanesh can do at that level. But for the Mountain West long term, a lot of this is going to hinge on the other coaching change at New Mexico. Richard Pitino, who did a very good job for the Lobos with incredible talent. JT Toppin was there, Donovan Dent was there, and this program succeeded. But Pitino now leaves. He goes to Xavier. He's going to coach against his father, Rick Pitino, in the Big East. But New Mexico instead replaces with Eric Olin, who comes over from UC San Diego, who was incredibly successful last year, won 30 games, took Michigan to the final possession in the first round of the NCAA tournament. By the way, that was the first year UC San Diego was even eligible to make the NCAA tournament, and they nearly pulled off a stunning upset. This is a big-time hire, not only for New Mexico, but frankly for the entire Mountain West, because if New Mexico falters as a program, as the program that was the only top or one of two top 50 teams at Ken Pom last year that's staying in this conference, that is a concern for the Mountain West collectively. So there's a lot of pressure on the shoulders of Eric Olin to deliver and to keep the Lobos as one of the better teams in the West Coast, and certainly one of the better teams in the Mountain West after this upcoming season. And then last, Kevin Kruger is out at UNLV, and the Rebels hired Josh Pastner, longtime coach, has been at Memphis. He was at Georgia Tech, has had a lot of success on the coaching trail. I'm very excited to see what he can do. Already looks like an invigorated roster for UNLV. If they can get an influx of money, which is a big challenge for UNLV, they are deep in the red. That has been a big storyline for them. But if they can find some NIL funds and convince some kids to come out to Sin City, I think you could see UNLV starting to knock on the door at the top of this conference.
And obviously Josh Pastner, not initially from that part of the country, but went to school at Arizona, was an assistant coach there. So he knows the lay of the land, gets how to recruit there a little bit. Obviously recruiting is wildly different now, but still, man, if I think that's a great get for the Running Rebels, can help hopefully buoy this conference moving forward. Andy, we'll keep our eyes on that. Just want to mention in passing as we keep going, a couple hot seat names. Joe Scott at Air Force, 4-28 last year. Yikes. Tim Miles at San Jose State as well. 15-20 last year, but 53-80 in 4 seasons. So we're watching those guys moving forward. Andy, the Mountain West has no returning first team players. So we're going to have to come up with brand new dudes to populate our first team preseason projections. That and our other preseason award projections all coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Mazda and this week's Moving the Game Forward moment, brought to you by Mazda. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, they move culture, and they keep the game moving forward. This week's moment that moves the game forward, I don't know that it could be anything else than Bruce Pearl's sudden retirement at Auburn and ultimately passing the torch along to his son, Stephen Pearl, and his 5-year contract. Hey, boy. The pressure is on for Stephen to deliver in a big way with results with this loaded Auburn roster, and he's going to look to lead the Tigers forward into a new era. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Andy, I said it in the teaser heading into this, but literally the Mountain West has no returning first team all conference players last year, a couple second teamers, but we got to repopulate this thing. So here we go. One of the rules for those of you who might be new here is we do not allow ourselves more than one player from any team so that we can spread around the love and give you some other stuff. That was kind of hard, Andy, for me, because there were a couple Aztecs I wanted to put both on this list. And so we had to spread the love around more. Who is going on your first team all Mountain West Conference preseason?
Yeah, with 5 spots, I probably wouldn't have realistically considered 3 San Diego State players, but I absolutely would have considered 2. And in fact, if this rule wasn't here, I'm almost certain I would have had 2 players from San Diego State on this list. They have an incredible amount of talent. Also, was surprised to learn that 2 of these players in particular were not first team all Mountain West players last year. They are both on my projected list to be first teamers this year. That would be Miles Byrd from San Diego State. He was my pick over Magoon Guath, over Reese Waters, who I think will have very strong arguments to be in this conversation in actuality when the Mountain West rankings come out. But Miles Byrd was a guy who shockingly chose not to stay in the NBA draft. A lot of places had him pegged as an early second round pick, maybe even sneaking into the late first conversation. Instead, he comes back. He's a big guard, versatile, very good scorer, should take on an even bigger load for this team after Nick Boyd departs and goes over to Wisconsin. I wouldn't be surprised if he is the best player in this conference and significantly boosts his NBA draft stock. After him is Mason Falslev, who is probably the most surprising player that wasn't first teamer last year. Mason Falslev, is outstanding. Another great returner to this conference for a team like Utah State. To be able to keep him and have him back in the mix for the Aggies is tremendous. Those were the two easy picks. After that, it got a little bit more difficult. I'm going with Andrew Meadow at Boise State as well. Meadow last year averaged about 12.5 points, 4 boards, was really efficient scorer, 58% on 2-pointers, 35% from 3. He's got a little Tyson Degenhart in his game where he's like a 3-4 hybrid, good scorer, versatile offensive player, and Leon Rice really knows what to do with these types of players. So I think Meadows in line for a big breakout for the Broncos this year. And then I'm going with Kimani Hamilton at UNLV. A couple options we could have gone with at UNLV, but Hamilton coming over from High Point, again, really efficient player last year for a very good High Point team, 13 points, 4.5 boards, 60% on 2-pointers. I think he's a really good fit for Josh Pastner's club, and I think he's going to have a great year for the Runnin' Rebels. And then my last pick is for the newest team in the conference. That would be Nana Owusu-Anane from Grand Canyon coming in. I think he's going to be one of the most productive transfers in the entire conference. He was at Brown last year, averaged about 15 points and 9 boards in the Ivy League. Again, another player that I think we're going to see Bryce Drew and the Lopes do some really good stuff with this year.
Yeah, Andy, that's a great list. Love all your choices there. You know why Leon Rice is so good at helping those guys? Because he just lets them cook. That's all you really got to do with a player like that. Is so good. Andy and I had agreement on 3 of the players. I also had Mason Falslev on mine. Second teamer, as Andy said, almost inexplicably last year, but there you go. Andrew Meadow at Boise State. And then Kimani Hamilton I had as well, coming over from High Point. As Andy said, really good last year. They were an NCAA tournament team. Obviously, their head coach, Alan Huss, off to Creighton to be the coach in waiting. My 2 that did not align with Andy's are, I really struggled, as Andy said, with my San Diego State choice. I kind of hesitated on Reese Waters. He's supposed to be fully healthy, but, I think if we're picking choices like this, you maybe have some hesitation there, but man, he could be phenomenal. I actually ended up going with Magoon Gwath over Miles Byrd, and I know it makes a ton more sense to probably go with Miles Byrd because he's the returning all-conference player. But Magoon Gwath last year missed a good bit of time with some health stuff. Assuming his health this year, there's just so much that he does so variably and so capably that I think, assuming a full season of play, just takes over the Mountain West, not just San Diego State, but the whole conference, and will be in great shape. And then my 5th pick there was a different Grand Canyon transfer. I actually went with Jaden Henley, who had Grand Canyon stayed in the WAC, would not have been an in-conference transfer, but since they came over, he is. Last year, he was at UNLV, 12.5 points, 4.2 boards, 1.8 assists, 1.6 steals, shot 35% from 3 and 86.4% from the free throw line. I think he, along with Hamilton and with Owusu-Anane at Grand Canyon there, it's going to be a great team for Josh Pastner here in year 1. And so that's my top 5 there. So Andy, out of those quintets, we got to pick our preseason predicted player of the year. Who you going with?
Yeah, I'm going with Miles Byrd here. I think he's just the best scorer in this conference. He's on the best team in this conference. Again, he's so versatile. He's so dynamic. And we've seen these kinds of players, these kind of bigger guards, just have so much success under Coach Dutcher for the Aztecs. It was hard for me to pick somebody not at San Diego State because I just think they are quite clearly the best team in this conference. And if Byrd is the leading scorer for a team that wins the conference by potentially 2 or 3 games, which I think is very possible, I don't know how he doesn't win this award unless somebody like Falslev goes absolutely nuclear and averages like 20 a game, which frankly, he could put up numbers numbers that make it hard to not pick him. But Byrd is the best player on the best team, and to me that puts him as the heavy favorite in my mind to be the player of the year here. Even though somebody like Magoon Guath is great, and Isaac, we have stopped doing defensive player of the year projections, but I'll tell you right now that's a very easy one for this conference. He won it as a freshman. He's going to win it again as a sophomore, health provided.
Yeah, that's Ryan Kalkbrenner level of no-brainer, right? For sure. Well, interestingly enough, Andy, I am going with Falslev for my preseason player of the year prediction. 15 points a game last year at Utah State, led the Mountain West in steals per game at 2.3, got 6.3 rebounds a game. This, as a reminder, is a 6'3" guard, 3.7 assists. I mean, he just does so much. Shot 39% from 3 on 4 attempts a game. Andy, here's my favorite random weird Mason Falslev stat. You ready for this?
Yeah.
His freshman year, well, what is he? Again, a 6'3" guard. Am I correct in that, Andy Patton? Yeah. Led the Mountain West in 2-point percentage his freshman year at 66.8%, which was higher than his free throw percentage. Wow. Oh, by the way, really crazy stuff there. But I think it's a very safe bet, as you did, to go with the San Diego State Aztec player. I'm just kind of banking on Falslev just taking over, having a massive usage rate and being hard to ignore. Transfer of the year pick, Andy, I'm going to go with Jaden Henley as mine, on my first team, my Grand Canyon player. And interestingly, I think you might have done something similar here.
Yeah, I did. I also went with Nana Owusu-Anane from Grand Canyon. Again, the transfer coming over from Brown. I think that those two players in particular are going to be really, really big forces to deal with for the Lopes. They also have Dusty Stromer coming over from Gonzaga. This is a team that is built on the backs of transfers. I do want to mention a player we haven't talked about yet in this conversation as well, and that's Sean Newman coming over from Louisiana to join San Diego State. I think he was third or fourth in the country in assists per game last year, behind like Brian Nemhard and Mo Odom, and I think Braden Smith. I think those are the only guys ahead of him in assists per game, and he's probably not going to put up those kind of numbers for the Aztecs because they play a slower pace, but he's a tremendous player that I want to give some love to. Since we've already talked about Owusu and we've already talked about Henley, figured I'd give him some love too. I think he's going to be a great player for the Aztecs.
All right, Andy, let's go to our freshman of the year predictions. Who you got?
Yeah, I'm going with, this was a tough one. There's some decent freshmen for some of the better teams in this conference, but I really don't see a lot of playing time for any of them materializing. And then the teams that might play freshmen more likely are not landing freshmen that are ranked very highly or ranked at all. I ended up settling on Melvin Bell, who's heading to San Jose State. He's the 32nd ranked shooting guard in the 2025 class, according to 247 Sports. And again, it's more of I think that Melvin Bell will play legitimate minutes for San Jose State, whereas some of these other freshmen I just don't think are going to get that kind of role. So Melvin Bell maybe is not the most talented freshman in the conference, but I think he is going to be one of, if not the most productive freshman, just by virtue of playing a big role for the Spartans of San Jose State this year.
To that point, Andy, I think Tace, the most talented freshman for my money's worth in the conference, who's coming into San Diego State. But as you've heard us talk about, there's a lot coming back for Brian Dutcher, and so I don't think he will have the role. Someone that I think is a little bit of a mix of the talent and potentially the role is Tyron Jones at UNLV. He's a 6'8", 190-pound wing that I really think is going to play a nice role for Josh Pastner here in year one. It's just about how does it translate for the freshman. I think that'll be the right combination of talent and opportunity. Andy, let's wrap it up with Coach of the Year. Who you got?
Yeah, I'm going with Pastner here. New coaches coming into a league, if you invigorate the program, you boost them up in the standings, that tends to get you noticed for this kind of award. They were like 6th, I think, in the Mountain West last year. If they finish 4th, which is not a big jump, but if they finish 4th, if there's a lot of optimism around the program, if they beat some teams they don't typically beat, I think that might be enough for him to win it. It probably should be Brian Dutcher. And what I said earlier, if San Diego State wins this league by 3 games, even 2 games, it should be him. And it would be upsetting, frankly, if it was not him at that point. But Pastner's on my list. And to a different degree, I think that we got to consider Bryce Drew here. If Grand Canyon comes in, finishes anywhere higher than 4th in this league in their first year, I think Bryce Drew wins it. I'm not quite sure. I think they're going to be quite at that level, but that's the other name that's kind of on my mind here too.
Which would certainly petty flag flying high. Andy, I did go with Brian Dutcher. Just makes sense. to get it to the guy that's kind of, this team is dominated in a lot of ways, the Mountain West recently, on their way out to the Pac-12, unless if the Mountain West is going to be petty, I think they would definitely not give it to him. But just kind of spoiler alert on some of my projections later. It just, the team that sweeps both the regular season and conference tournament championships, which I think San Diego State's going to do. How do you not give it to them? That's where I'm at.
Well, let's talk about those projections, Isaac, because we're going to talk about who's going to win the league, who's going to make the tournament, how many teams from this conference are going to make it in the final year of this conference as we know it. We're going to get to all that and rank these teams by tiers coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, it's almost the weekend, and it's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more each time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. Today, we're talking Indiana Hoosiers. Fernando Mendoza delivered in a big way. He was 21 of 23 for 267 yards and 5 touchdowns last week when the pressure was on. Mendoza came through, no hesitation and no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance is not a fluke. Indiana has been great, and Mendoza has been on a streak with that win over Illinois. Just like Mendoza delivered for Indiana, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday that you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day, only with DoorDash. Terms apply, promo period through November 18th.
This episode's also brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Y'all, caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the punch and the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. And Andy, I need that because I'm 41 years old and I'm trying to get rid of some sugar. What I love most is how portable these little buddies are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get that boost when you need it. Andy, I've been looking at those flavors. The one I'm looking at that I'm intrigued by right now is Purple Berry Punch. I know that sounds maybe kind of weird and not like real mannish, but it sticks out to me, and I think that's the one I want to try next. Honestly, I love how fast it kicks in. I love that it's sugar-free, so I don't have to worry about crashing later. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5 Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love, or how about this? Be bold and try something new in-store and online at 5hourenergy.com, or you can grab them on Amazon. Check it out today. Andy, as we always do in our conference previews, we have the conference tiered out into different tiers based on where we think they will land or how good they will be. You prepped today's tier, so I'll let you take it away, sir.
Yeah, I felt kind of silly doing 6 tiers for what is 12 teams, but it really felt like there was a lot of kind of divination. You know what I'm trying to say? A lot of dividing lines
totally
for
know
this league. And I think that starts at the top, because for me, and we've kind of alluded to this already throughout the show, San Diego State is in its own tier. That was kind of the first and very obvious decision for me. I know they did not finish at the top of the league last year. I know they had finished 4th in the regular season and kind of stumbled down the stretch, and obviously did not do well in the NCAA tournament. But because of the returning talent, because they get Guath back, because they get Byrd back, because they get Reese Waters back, he missed all of last year with an injury, like that, combined with some quality transfer portal additions, some depth returners like Pharaoh Compton and BJ Davis and Taj DeGorville, like this team just has so much returning talent, so much upside. They're very clearly ahead of everybody else. Tier number 2 for me was both Utah State and Boise State, 2 soon-to-be Pac-12 teams alongside San Diego State. They're both have been very consistently at or near the top of this conference. They both returned very key pieces. They both have very good coaches. They're just a touch above everybody else. I thought about including Colorado State there, but I do have them a bump down in Tier 3. I have both Colorado State and New Mexico in Tier 3 because they have those new coaches, and we just need to see what Farouk Manesh looks like as a head coach and what Eric Olin looks like as a coach in a tougher conference. I also lumped Grand Canyon into Tier 3 here. A lot of folks are projecting them higher than me. They think they're going to come in and finish 3rd, 4th in the league. I'm not quite there. I wouldn't be stunned if that happened. I'm not like completely shocked if that's the reality. I'm just more thinking they're more like 5, 6 at this point. Tier 4 is the 2 Nevada schools, Nevada and UNLV. Again, for Pastner, just need to see him prove it before I move them up. Tier 5 is San Jose State and Wyoming. There just was a big enough gap between where those schools are, which is not a great place, but they are pretty far ahead of where both Fresno State and Air Force in particular are right now, that those had to be on their own separate tier. I mean, Air Force is projected like 320th, I think, at Torvik. Like that's just horrendous for a school in a conference that is a routine multi-bid league. Like those two teams kind of had to be on their own for me.
Yeah, Andy, all of that makes sense. I feel like this is so often the case when we respond to these tiers. It's kind of the bookends where we feel most certain. But what's interesting about the Mountain West tiers, and where I agree with you so much, is the bookends here extend further into the middle than it does in a lot of conferences. Because I'm right with you on tiers 1 and 2. I'm right with you on 5 and 6. And 4, which is the place of uncertainty, I think, for this conference. And a lot of that is because of so much of the newness, the new coaches at Colorado State, New Mexico, and UNLV, the new school coming in Grand, and the Nevada of it all. Like it seems like maybe they're going to be coming back a little bit more this year. And so, I feel like UNLV maybe could be a bit higher, right? Like we've seen Pastner do it at higher levels. Nevada could be higher. Maybe Colorado State takes a step back with Nico out the door, and with losing some critical talent pieces in a Nick Clifford, in a Kyan Evans, for examples, right? And so, but ultimately, I don't necessarily quibble with it. I think I would just have combined 3 and 4. And how funny would that be? We would have 5 tiers in this 12-team league, but the middle one would have 5 teams in it. And so I think that's where the question mark is in this conference, which is ultimately going to influence one of our next conversations about how many teams NCAA tournament this year. Andy, the way we've been talking about it, I think it's probably going to be pretty obvious here, but maybe I'll ask it of you this way, because folks, one of the things we do here in this last segment is always give our regular season and conference tournament projections. Is there anybody you even seriously considered for either outside of San Diego State?
Not really, no. For regular season, it would very much surprise me if somebody upset San Diego State. I think there's a reasonable chance in a league that has not had any like singularly dominant teams recently. I would be pretty surprised if somebody was even within a game and a half or 2 games of San Diego State this year. I think they are that much better than the other teams in the conference, and that's Utah State returning an incredibly key piece in Mason Falslev. Boise State has a ton of talent, but to me, San Diego State is heads and shoulders above. Do I think somebody could clip them in the conference tournament? Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. I don't think that San Diego State is infallible, but I would be very surprised if over the course of a conference season, if they didn't win it by a fairly healthy margin. But Mason Falslev could go crazy and Utah State could win the conference tournament. Boise State could win the conference tournament. They are a very, very tough team, and Leon Rice has had Brian Dutcher's number more than a lot of other teams in this conference have. Even Grand Canyon could make some serious noise and pull off a stunner and win that conference tournament. But no, I wrote San Diego State down in both those spots and didn't think a whole lot more about it, because I think that they are the best team by a fairly considerable margin.
Yeah, and my sentiments are the exact same. I mean, look, Utah State actually has a coach back for the first time since Jesus was reborn, came back to life. And so maybe Jared Calhoun brings that team and they can win the tournament or something. But I'm with you. It's the regular season where it's just like, man, I just don't see it outside of the Aztecs. Andy, all of that said, we think San Diego State should win this thing. They're an auto bid. They would make it anyway, most likely based on at-large capabilities. Who else is going to make the NCAA tournament out of this conference?
Yeah, I think they're going to drop. They've been 4 pretty consistently the last half decade or so. I think we're going to see just 3 this year. And honestly, if you told me it's not 3, I would be more inclined to guess 2 than 4.
Rather than 4.
I just think that the middle of the league is weaker. Colorado State, I think, has taken a step down. I think New Mexico takes a step down. We'll see if UNLV can kind of take a big enough step up in Grand Canyon to kind of help mitigate that. But I think there's more quad 3 than quad 2 games in conference play. And I think that's enough. Because again, we're talking about a conference that puts 4 teams in the dance, but usually 3 of them are bubble teams. They're very rarely putting teams in the tournament as single digit seeds outside of like maybe 1 per year. And I think that's a big part of this conversation is the margin for this conference getting 4 teams and 1 team feels razor thin in a way that is kind of unusual. And to me, I think that those margins kind of finally collapse a little bit. And next year, obviously, it'll be way different. But for this year, I do think San Diego State makes it. I think Utah State makes it. And I think Boise State makes it. But I think it's close. I think it's something like San Diego State's maybe a single digit 7-6 seed. I think Utah State and Boise State are like 10 seeds or play-in seeds. And then maybe Grand Canyon sneaks in. Maybe New Mexico does it and Eric Olin proves that he's the right guy for the job. But I'm picking 3, and I'm inclined to pick 2 if it's not going to be 3.
It's rare, Andy, that we diverge from one another, but I actually did go for the 3 that you said. And then I think just somebody ends up popping from that group of those middle tiers we were talking about just a second ago, from UNLV, Grand Canyon, New Mexico, Colorado State, something like that. And I think maybe I'm relying too much on the history and precedent of the last half decade you just mentioned. And so I'm curious to see what a now more analytically driven selection committee will do with that. That's going to be a really interesting thing to watch as this season unfolds for sure. Well, guys, there it is. The Mountain West Conference. As Andy said earlier, this is our 4th conference preview. We've done the ACC, SEC, and A10. We will link those up in the corner on YouTube for those of you watching. If you're listening, you can go back and find those elsewhere in the feed. Next week, we will be back to the power conference level on Friday. We haven't decided yet whether that'll be Big 12, 10, or Big East, but it'll be big. I can tell you that much. I can promise you, Andy, right? And then we'll have some great other team previews and other content coming at you next week as well. If you haven't subscribed to the show on YouTube and audio, do it right now so you don't miss a second in the lead up to the season. If you've not joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, we've been having some fun conversations in there this week. It's starting to heat up. Let's go. That link's in the show notes, free to join. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the McBruins, and until Monday. Peace.